sensitivity in keeping a society stable and in keeping society able to develop is to keep politics away from religion. This is, for me, this is one of the most important messages that we need to pass on to our friends in the Middle East. I don't believe that we should be, I have too much experience in that part of the world to feel at ease to tell people how they should run their countries. I think that historically when outsiders have tried to do that, most of the cases they've been wrong. But what we need to do is we need to put down these pillars for our own policy so that we do not end up being surprised by developments sometime down the line. Egypt is a vastly important country, not to underestimate the importance of any other country in the region, but Egypt is the stability of Egypt, the prosperity of the people of Egypt is very important, and this example that Egypt sets to the rest of the region will be crucial. Therefore, I think in the next few days or hours, how quickly and how effective the transition to more participatory government will take place, how effective and how quickly the army will be able to, introduce security to the country will be the key questions. I think we've seen a lot of very scary things happening on the streets of Cairo, but I think we've also seen very encouraging things. And these encouraging things is that the people who came out to protest were actually young people, men, women, professionals, and we saw in many cases how the Egyptian army and the people of Egypt did try to work side by side to bring security in a very difficult situation. So again, the example of what happens in the next couple of days will be vital for the rest of the Arab world.
Indeed, maybe by the time we air this interview, things might have changed, but a lot of people, of course, in Turkey are also wondering whether or not Turkey can play as a role model for these types of countries, because in the end we do have a secular democracy with a more Islamic-leaning government in place, but indeed a secular democracy. And we do hope the same for all our friends in North Africa and in Middle East to actually have more opportunities, because when I was reading that even in countries like Yemen, that the unemployment rate amongst youth is as high as 75%. We in Turkey were complaining that it's 25% for youth, the unemployment rate. That's a huge number, and a lot of people feel like they really have no future in these countries, and hopefully all of this will change.
Well, look, the Arab world was, the way that the Arab world looks today was formed after the end of the First World War. And at the end of the Second World War, it was transformed. So today we face the question of will there be enough strength in Arab society to reform their societies in a way that they respect more, that they introduce more participation in government without giving up on some of the most important achievements which many of these countries have had until now, and this is the ability to stay a secular state. In this, I think Turkey has can give a lot of examples, can share a lot of the lessons it has learned over the years of its own development. But again, I would hasten very much everyone, Turkey included, from transferring what we have in our own history here in Central and Eastern Europe, or your history in Turkey, and transferring that immediately to the Arab world. We must be very sensitive to the complicated nature and the complex linkages which exist in Arab society that need to be finessed rather than hit with a hammer on the head. I think that would be very wrong.
Actually, while we were talking, I was wondering one thing, because a lot of people are likening it to what happened in Eastern Europe in 1989, and that this might actually cause a domino effect, and a lot of the countries in the Middle East might have a change of leadership and, of course, a change of regime. What would that mean for energy security, for energy markets of the world? That's also something that many people are talking about at the moment.
Well, just firstly on the comparison, I know that a lot of people are making this comparison. I hasten to make it. I think that the reasons why people went out on the streets of Tunisia, of Egypt, or of Yemen, or any other country that we see now in the news may be very similar, but the circumstances in each country are very different. Drawing an immediate parallel between the withdrawal of the Soviet Empire, the collapse of the Berlin Wall in Central and Eastern Europe, and what is happening now in the Arab world is very superficial. What that means for energy markets is, again, it raises the uncertainty. It raises the uncertainty for all who rely on this part of the world. However, we may also, in this time of uncertainty, look and identify that actually in those countries that with great difficulty and with terrible loss of human life and very, very hard problems, for example, Iraq, societies slowly but surely are being able to move away from a dictatorship, which was Saddam Hussein, into some sort of an agreement among themselves on a political process, and that, I think, difficult example of Iraq, because Iraq is a very controversial example to use these days, may actually point to the fact that democracy and stability in the long run are possible in the Middle East, and if you look at our energy security, that is one of the guarantees that in the long run will really guarantee our supplies. But this is a very, very thin argument at this point.
It is a thin argument, but the more that we're talking about it, the more I'm starting to think that maybe, including the Middle East in the Nabucco project and finding ways of including Middle Eastern supplies into the project are probably much more viable by then. Let's see. Let's hope for the best. Inshallah, exactly. One of the other very sad incidents that recently happened was, of course, the attacks in Moscow and the terrible loss of life. And a lot of people are wondering what's happening in the Northern Caucasus and about the stability of the Northern Caucasus. Here I cannot help but mention what your Prime Minister said. I was just reading in the news because when asked whether or not Bulgaria was worried about a similar type of terrorist attack, he said that you weren't worried about it because you have a doner kebab shop in every corner, so you have very good relations with the Arabs. This was.
I think what the Prime Minister was pointing to is very important, and that is that we're not worried, we're vigilant. And I think we should all be vigilant about the danger of radicalism coming to our own doorsteps. Part of our own strategy, if you wish, on how to address that is to develop strong links with all of our neighbors. And this government in particular has focused quite a lot of its attention, and a large part of my own time as Minister of Foreign Affairs is to rebuild our relationship with countries in the Arab world.
Which you're doing a great job, actually. I was reading about that. The Middle Eastern countries are now praising Bulgaria's efforts.
Well, I hope that this is recognized, but I also hope that this helps not just in our own ability to address the possible challenges that may come from this part of the world, but also to identify economic opportunities that we can work together jointly. Indeed, our trade with the Middle East has increased in this time of recession and difficulty, has increased by some 50%, about 50% in 1 year. So more interaction, more focus on understanding what are the challenges, what are the issues, is part of this overall context which we must create for each other. What happened in Moscow was a terrible incident. It was cruel and unjust, and there's nothing that can justify taking human life like that. I hope that the Russian authorities will very quickly identify those linkages that exist, that have allowed for this to happen, that they will pursue the criminals and the terrorists who stood behind it, but they will also look into the deeper reasons why such radicalism exists. And these are the deeper reasons that we all must be vigilant of. I mean, Turkey
we've suffered from this, of course.
Terror.
We're, in a way, it's really sad to say, but even used to hearing about these types of terrible events taking place all around the country. And it's something that should be stopped at whatever cost there is. Actually, you're being such a young minister, you actually were the Minister of Defense before. And so, of course, I'm sure our viewers are going to find it really amazing that at such a young age you had such a high important post. But because you were the Minister of Defense and now because you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs, one thing I'd like to ask you about is on a completely different subject, what's happened with the WikiLeaks scandal. And do you think that these leaks are going to change the way we conduct diplomacy from now on for